It's no secret that 2025 belongs to the horror genre. We've had Sinners, Weapons, 28 years later, Final Destination, Bloodlines, Hallow Road, Presence, Nosferatu, The Ugly Stepsister. All horror films that I think have done great things for a genre that is usually saturated with genericism and déjà vu. A genre that is frustratingly overlooked when it comes to awards season. So this year, I'm hoping that films like Sinners and Weapons will be the dramatic hand emerging from the grave to take victory. But today we are talking about the titan of modern horror franchises, The Conjuring, and its supposedly final film, Last Rites. This is the 10th film in the franchise and horror's answer to Avengers Endgame. And I have to say, I had a surprisingly good time with this film. I've never been a huge fan of the Conjuring films, more so a casual observer. They have always had my curiosity. They walk such a fine line between breathing new life into the exorcism formula whilst wrapping their plots into the based on a true story package. And if you couldn't tell, I was holding up two hands to gesture inverted commas there. But they are films that have always had great production value, a damn cool 60s and 70s aesthetic, and characters that are just interesting to watch and that you care about. Outside of that, the films pretty much follow a tried and true formula that takes itself very seriously, but I still find them to have a lot of entertaining moments, interesting filmmaking, and some great ideas. So The Conjuring Last Rites is directed by Michael Chavez, who has previously directed the 3 other films in the franchise, but don't despair, I think this one is a league above those films. Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson return as the Warrens, now with a bit of grey in those sideburns, as they are no longer taking cases and are trying to settle down, write a book, spend some time with their daughter Judy, who's played by Mia Tomlinson, and her new boyfriend Tony, played by Ben Hardy. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, the Smurl family have a creepy mirror to contend with. This is, of course, loosely based on the haunting of the Smurl family that took place in the 1980s, and some of the occurrences that supposedly happened in those hauntings are recreated in this film, inverted commas again. And as with the 3 previous films, the Star Wars-esque passages at the start read, the Warrens take on their most dangerous case yet. I will leave it a surprise as to how all this comes to be, but this is a long film, clocking in at 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it does take its time getting to the hauntings. This is a family film first, and I appreciate the time it took to develop its characters. I should also say that this film has a prologue that is quite audaciously followed by the sentence, based on a true story, and it feels slightly insulting as an audience member, because I think attempting to ground these films in realism loses some of the fun, because this film is fun. I think it offers a satisfying and enjoyable conclusion to the franchise, not without its faults, of course, but we'll get there. But it's the most screen time we've ever spent with the Warrens. They've always been the emotional core of these films, so more time with them here isn't a bad thing. And the films that pitch themselves as franchise finales usually get a bit of extra goodbye padding. Just look at Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning from earlier this year. But I think a lot of people that want the horror here might be a bit disappointed, because I think this is the least scary of the 4 mainline films, and this film is for fans of the characters, not the scares. I found the greatest hits list of scare tactics here to be surprisingly lukewarm. Every crash, bang, wallop, and boo is something we've all seen before. There's a couple of good scares in here, don't get me wrong, and there are a couple that might be the worst in the franchise. I think the CGI might have something to do with it, but I guess I'm just a little tired of every demon smiling at me with the same evil grin and looking really goofy whilst they're doing it. They're lurking in the same corner with the same creepy wind-up lullaby, and of course, Annabelle, because you can't have a Conjuring film without Annabelle. Now, I think in this film's case, the element of nostalgia is expected. The irony is not lost on me that in a film where its main antagonist is a mirror, this film spends a lot of time reflecting on the history of the Warrens, including their past entities and trauma, but it also reminded me of the frustrating reality of this franchise, a franchise that has frequently made me smile and go, that's a cool idea, where there is a nice little flourish in the cinematography or a clever use of an artifact, but it is frustrating when it all amounts to the same thing. So what I'm trying to say here is go into this film to revel in its characters, its heart, and its farewell. Don't expect to be thrilled by the haunting this time round. Although I should add, because it is essentially the same setup as the previous 3 films, it does gloss over a lot of the evidence gathering that was part of the first 2 films, so naturally there is less haunting anyway. And I'm not upset about that, because I think it would have just been even more of a rehash than what we've already seen. I think this film's central heart means well. I was expecting to be a bit more bored by it, but I quite enjoyed the time I spent with the Warrens, and I think Tony might be the scariest entity the Warrens have had to face yet. Sure, the family plot lines get a bit clunky and a little bit unnecessary at times, but the chemistry is there, the performances are solid, so what's not to like? And in terms of the filmmaking on display, it does what a Conjuring film does best. It mixes in some drone shots, some dramatic camera pans, and slow, creepy cinematography that gets you into the jolt of the action, throwing you around just as much as it does the furniture. Some great establishing shots in here too. I've always appreciated the fact that these films, despite their generic scares, have never felt too generic in their filmmaking choices. I think they do try a lot of stuff, and I think a lot of it works. And this film's grading too feels much grittier than the somewhat glossy feel of the third film. The score is what you'd expect. It feels like one instrument slowly opening a door to an overstuffed room of many other instruments that suddenly fall over. But there's also a couple of really nice melodic moments when the film tugs at your heartstrings. A few notes reminded me of the more gentle melodies in Inception's score. So what we end up here with is a family drama with contractually obligated jump scares, something that conjures a sense of deja vu over nostalgia at times. Honestly, a lot of my complaints kind of feel somewhat irrelevant because, I will say it for the 100th time in this review, I had fun. I could endlessly nitpick this film, but I still found it an enjoyable watch. And I was also a fan of the climactic sequence in this. I think it brings everything together quite well and then offers a nice little epilogue. This doesn't sit on the level of the horror films I mentioned at the intro, but it's not a bad film, and I think it's just more proof that the horror films being made this year just have a higher bar of quality. And it's nice to see that seems to be extending to some of the sequels we've been getting as well. I think this is a much stronger film than the third entry, not quite living up to the highs of the first 2 films, but it is solid. And I think if you've enjoyed any of the Conjuring films before, you will certainly enjoy this one. And one last thing I have to mention, the cinema etiquette these days. I've seen a lot of people start commenting on this, and my audience tonight gave me all the evidence I needed. Arriving so late, waving torches and phones around, having full conversations, checking their phones throughout the film, taking flash photos of the screen mid-film, it's genuinely baffling behavior. Like, what is happening? It's the film's opening night, and I saw this at the IMAX in Leicester Square. Who do you think you are? Anyway, I appreciate if you're watching a film review on YouTube, you are most likely not the problem, but this is definitely becoming a bit of an issue, I think. Anyway, that's all I have to say on this one, so please do consider subscribing. Let me know what you thought of the film in the comments, and now all that's left to do is to thank you very much for watching.